Welcome to The Drummer's Pathway, the podcast about music, life, and the creative process. Hello, I'm Michael Scott, and welcome to the Drummer's Pathway podcast, where we explore the personal and professional journeys of drummers, educators, and artists who've committed their lives to creativity and the arts. This episode features my conversation with Richard Millsap. Born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas, and currently based in Los Angeles, Richard is an in-demand musician who has recorded numerous records as a multi-instrumentalist. He was a member of the Band of Heathens for a decade and is currently the drummer with music icon John Fogerty. In this episode, we reflect on the recent passing of drumming legend James Gadson and the profound influence he had on his career, the lessons learned as a student of Ed Soph at the University of North Texas, and why it's important to always make choices that reflect your desired path while navigating life's obstacles. And now, let's get started with my conversation with Richard Millsap. To start off, I want to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Matt Starr, for connecting us. I believe he had met you for coffee at some point, and he sent me a message and said, I just met this guy, Richard, that really needs to be a guest on your show. So he connected us, and I'm really grateful for those organic connections that come through, just the relationships that you build throughout the community. So, and we've been texting a little bit back and forth since then, but it's really nice to actually sit back now and get a chance to chat and get into your story a little bit. And to begin with, how's your cat doing?
Yeah, the cat's good. The stray that we've been having hanging around, his name is Charlie. He's an old tomcat, and he's been hanging around our place now for maybe 4 or 5 months. And so we kind of finally were like, okay, let's take him in, let's get him neutered and do the whole thing, But yeah, he's good. We have, my wife and I have 2 cats that those are our little ones, and they sleep next to me. So yeah, we're a cat household, and it's funny, we've had a couple of strays do that, where I think people talk about it too. It's like cats will pick you, and this, maybe it's they find who the suckers are in the neighborhood, who's going to put out all the food for them, and that's definitely my wife and I. So yeah, he's good. He's isolated in a room. He's got a big old cone on him, and we're just happy he's doing well. So yeah, thanks for asking. My sister-in-law actually works at a vet, and so the 2 cats that I have kind of came from that situation where it's like they need a home. Oh yeah, so, beautiful. Hence, that's how that relationship came through, and it's like they become your family, and Absolutely. I find sometimes in the chaos of life, despite the fact that cats have their own little personalities, there's something very comforting about having a pet that you can just kind of just chill and hang out with. So when we started talking about cats, I knew you were my kind of people, and that we were going to get along really well. Yes. Well, I'm happy to hear that, man. Yeah.
Before we kind of get into some of your story, I just want to say that I was very saddened by the recent loss of music legend James Gadson, who was an iconic drummer and very influential figure in the music industry. And you had recently posted a picture sort of sharing some of your connections to some of your stories about getting to know James Gadson. And I'm really interested in getting your perspective, and how did that connection come about, and how was he an inspiration or influence to you in your career?
Man, I just got the chills. Well, I was so familiar with him on records before I got to meet him. Let's see, my good friend Joe Sublette, who is a sax player here in LA, he put us in touch. This was some time ago. I moved out here for about a year or so before I went back to Texas, and then eventually wound up back here. But when I came out here, I was reaching out to people, just to see, what I could get myself into, what to do, and just hopefully get some help, and Joe immediately put us in touch. And I think I must have called James, and I found out he told me he was playing. And so I went to go see him, and I think it was on his birthday. I didn't know, and I get there, and I remember there being a lot of gifts and desserts and all sorts of things for James. So that's just a little side note there. But yeah, we just talked, and he was immediately just really kind and happy to hold the conversation with someone that he had just met, and a drummer, nonetheless, who I just can't imagine how many of those conversations somebody like him had in his lifetime, where a young drummer would come up, and who knows what they would say. But I would imagine that each one of those conversations felt the same for him, as in the one that I had with him, where it was just like, he was just a really generous, genuine, humble guy. And you meet, it's not always that way when you meet anyone really, but it's so uplifting, especially to younger musicians who are trying to figure out what they're doing. Whenever there is a guy like that, an OG, who is the way James was. And yeah, I'm so thankful for the time I had with him. And he left a mark, for sure. And I know he did on everybody, just the outpouring of love that I've seen since his passing. It's like everybody's kind of saying the same thing. It's just, yeah, a really beautiful guy.
If there's something that I've learned through a lot of the conversations that I've had on this podcast, it's that many people who have achieved these iconic statuses are really like you and I. They're just people that are passionate about their craft, that are thrilled to have conversations about things that we are all interested in, and they want to impart their wisdom and knowledge for people that are open to that. Where I think sometimes the disconnect comes into play is that when they get bombarded with people who are trying to take over the conversation or seeking something from them without valuing the knowledge and the wisdom that person has to impart. So it's just when you're able to just have that conversation, and listen, it's amazing how much information you're able to absorb from these experiences, because it's there to share, but they want to make sure that you are genuine to open up that conversation. And I think at that point, the people that are the true icons generally tend to be lifetime students of the instrument, where they're not content with their status. They're always pushing themselves more because they're so inspired by all of the stuff out there that they have yet to learn. And I think that's one of the things that really connects many people in the drumming community, is we generally have a passion to better ourselves and to explore all the different aspects of the instrument, rather than always just chasing that perception of success.
Yeah. And, just going back to James in particular, like he certainly was a lifetime student, and that he was playing, I would say like almost weekly up until he was getting a little too ill to continue doing that recently. So he was always playing, and he was playing with sometimes he was playing with younger musicians. He had a lot of experience as he grew with age and experience. There was a lot of younger players that he was playing with. So I think that that keeps you, you know, young and interested. He also was a man of like real serious faith and spirituality in a religious sense. So
Mm-hmm.
that I would imagine aided him in pushing the ego a little to the side, you know. So yeah, just yeah, I can't say enough good things about him. Yeah.
Now, you were born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas, and then later on you moved to LA, but right now you seem to be spending some of your time in Los Angeles and still spending a lot of time in Texas. So Texas and Los Angeles are very different dynamics. So when you go back to the earlier days when you were starting out, what was it like growing up as a youth, discovering music in that environment? I know your father was also a blues guitar player, and I'm sure had a profound influence in terms of the opportunities that you had. So can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like and how you got started?
Yeah, my dad's a guitar player. He was touring basically until I was born. I think he was about the time he got off the road. So sorry, Dad. But I'm also very thankful, you know, for that. But yeah, he had been touring with Delbert McClinton, who's a really fantastic Texas blues, country, rock, Americana, all of the above, vocalist and songwriter. Um, so I grew up with music just all around, you know, and my dad, whether it was him or myself, I'm not sure. I don't really know, but I started playing guitar. I would imagine he probably ushered me into the instrument. But I also probably wanted to be like him, you know, to an extent. So I started playing guitar when I was 5 and played guitar for a few years. I don't think I was really taking it anywhere seriously. But that was like the foundation of me getting into playing music, which is something that I've picked up a lot in the recent years. I've gone back to guitar and I'm playing that a whole lot. But yeah, he got me into guitar, and then there was a certain point, like he was also, when he got off the road, he was teaching guitar. So there was that environment, which he was a great teacher, but I think to me it was like, okay, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do what my dad's telling me
Yeah.
anymore. So I remember he had a music school. You know, it was a little humble strip mall spot in Fort Worth, and there were a few teachers that also taught there. And so I remember there was one point where I started taking guitar lessons from one of his other teachers, or from one of his teachers, not him. But yeah, and then I just switched to drums at some point. I don't really know why, but I would go out to see my dad play like on the weekends, or he'd take me with him to gigs. I don't know if I really had a choice because I could stay home, you know, alone. But there was a gig that he was doing. I think I was about 8, and I remember his drummer. I guess what I want to say, first of all, before I get into that, is Fort Worth, Texas has such a rich musical history, and specifically in regards to blues and like, you know, country and Western, or the Western swing. And jazz. I mean, Ornette Coleman went to school in, I can't believe I can't remember the name of the school. There's a high school in Dallas. I don't think it's Fort Worth. I hope nobody's listening from Fort Worth or Dallas. I'm going to hear about this. But like Ornette Coleman and I think King Curtis, like all these guys went to the same school, really terrific performing arts school. Anyways, really rich musical history. So, um, my dad, was kind of in more of the blues scene, and there was so much of that happening. And so I would go with him, to his shows. And yeah, there was a gig when I was about 8 that he was playing. And I just remember his drummer at the time, this guy named Arthur Tootie Tatty, who could play every instrument, really fantastic musician. He was playing drums, and I just remember he signaled me to come on stage. And then I'm just like, okay. So I get up there. I don't know what he's wanting me to do. And then he just one by one grabs like my limbs while he's playing and gets me to do what he's doing. And he's starting to step up from the kit. And then he just moves me onto the throne. And then I'm all of a sudden playing, my dad's looking back laughing. And, but that was kind of the beginning of that for me. And up until that point, my relationship with the music scene, or what my dad was doing, was really just from an outsider perspective and just watching. But yeah, I just the Fort Worth blues scene was really that was foundational for me, my upbringing.
When we are first starting out, we're put into these different situations, and some of them are trial by fire, and some of them are very much educational based. But sometimes the earliest lessons that we learn when we first start out end up being the most profound lessons, of which we carry with us throughout our musical journey and our career. So sometimes this is difficult, but when you look back, are there any things that you learned early on, from a musical standpoint, either from your father or from some of the early experiences, that you still carry with you today?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I'm not sure if it's anything that I can exactly pinpoint, but I would say mostly it would just be these like subconscious lessons learned, through the music that I was listening to. I mean, my dad had me very early on listening to the Beatles and the Stones. And I would say that, I mean, my earliest memory of listening to music is in the car with my dad listening to Beatles cassette tapes. So I think, I certainly learned a lot from that. Any like specific teachings, I can't really say that I could pinpoint something, but I would just say, being on stage with my dad and just playing with him and getting flash dirty looks every once in a while. Those are the kinds of lessons that I would say I learned and remember, and stuck with me.
Well, one of the conversations that often comes up in these interviews is when you look at different generations in terms of how we got into music. A lot of the current generation gets into drumming because of social media, and they follow the drumming path, whereas you and many of the people that I speak to got into drumming because of the music path. So it was music that caught your attention, that captivated you, and drums through that experience is the instrument that you found as a way for expression, rather than, wanting to be a drummer because you wanted to be a drummer without that connection to music. And I think that's one of the reasons why you have been so successful, is that you have that musical foundation where it really was about understanding the feel, the grooves, and the different styles, and embracing that, because that was something that was part of the sort of the soundtrack of your life. And, I find now, as a teacher, sometimes I'll talk to younger students and I always want to know what they're passionate about or what inspired them to pursue something. And often it was, I saw a video of someone playing the drums. Great. But it was not necessarily related to something that was music related. And then when you have the conversation about what songs do you like and what music inspires you, they can't answer that question because they've never invested the time into following the music path or exploring that because they were just captivated by the drum path. And so I think that's one of the things that sometimes people have to look at it is, find your way back to music because everything came from that in the first place. And I think that's something that you understand and that you've done exceptionally well.
Sure. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. I think playing with people too, that's kind of getting, what you're getting at. And this is a generational thing too. I think, I can't speak too much on it because I don't have that perspective, and anybody who is, my age and older, we don't know what it's like to just be bombarded with this social media thing being the end all be all, and needing the likes and translating the likes to like how good somebody is or the follows or whatever, it's so that is the world that we're living in, so I think the silver lining is teachers, like yourself, who are aware of that being an issue that can impact one's musical growth. Because that is a problem, I think, if you've got somebody who's playing drums just in their room, to film it, to post it, sure, maybe like they're getting their chops up or working on technical stuff or whatever, but there is a very seriously important component to developing one's musicality, and that's playing with people, whether it's being in a band or freelancing. And hopefully there are enough teachers out there who are, getting in the ears of the right kids to, and also whenever you're, I think about myself at, let's call it, the high school, early teenage years, I may have been into drumming, and that's like what I was doing, and I was a drummer, but I don't think I really understood what it meant to be a drummer or a musician or know what you're passionate about or be, an active listener. I don't think I got into any of that until I got to college and even after, it's just that age. You're just your brain still developing, it's like, So, anyways, I know that's an issue that, that's being faced by the young kids, and hopefully we can get around that at some point,
Well, and at that stage in your life, it's all about the exploration and the skill development. Mm-hmm. Then later on, once you start, playing more shows and working with people, you start to realize that you've developed a skill set. Now you're ready to have conversations. And once you realize that music is a conversation between the people on stage, you develop your listening skills, and that starts to alter what now becomes important in your musical process. When you're young, you want to lead the conversation. And so from a drumming standpoint, you tend to overplay, insert yourself into the conversation because you have something to prove. And that's part of the development. It's something we all go through, and it's a necessary part of the development. I think it's important, though, when as you learn, that you get to the point where you start to see the value of the conversation, because you can throw a whole bunch of musicians on stage that are out there to prove something, but there's no connection because they're not listening to each other. And I think the real joy of playing music is actually listening to each other. I've often said, with regards to social media, the irony of social media is that it's social and it's supposed to bring people together to open up the conversation. But in many ways, it's isolated the conversation, and it's now made people have to feel like they have to play a character in order to get the attention that they need.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, I've used social media as a way to develop genuine relationships and have conversations with people rather than seeking out, some of the other aspects. And everyone's got a different journey. But I think sometimes by creating a platform to bring people together, you actually create this disconnect.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that I have made some genuine relationships through social media, which I'm grateful for. Like Matt, talking about earlier, like we met through Instagram, and it feels silly to say it like that, but I think, when it just depends on how you're using it, and it affects everybody differently. I know friends that musicians who have dropped off of it, just because of the issues that you can face with like the comparison game or any of that kind of unhealthy stuff, which predates social media, but
yes,
it's just you got the magnifying glass on those things whenever you're on something like that. So yeah, it's all about how you use it, I suppose.
Now, you sort of followed the traditional path that many people do when you were going through school, where you played in a lot of the different school bands and had lots of different experiences. But after high school, you actually went on to do jazz studies at the University of North Texas. And one of the people you had a chance to study with was the iconic Ed Soph, who has a reputation for being pretty tough. But if you're willing to put in the effort, many people say it's one of the most unbelievable learning experiences in terms of their development. So what was the University of North Texas like to you? And I'm curious about what your experience was with Ed Soph.
Yeah, it was probably one of the more overwhelming experiences of my life, while also at the same time just being absolutely incredible and inspiring and really wonderful. I had come from a high school in Fort Worth, which Denton is only, a 30, maybe 40-minute drive from Fort Worth. So very close. And a lot of musicians that go through that program, stick around. So, or they're teaching at, if they were like doing music ed, they come out of UNT with a music ed degree, then they're gonna most likely be teaching at a school in the surrounding area. So I was fortunate in being as close as I was to UNT, and being in a musical program in high school, because we benefited from that and having guys teaching that had gone through the program. So I had one specific teacher by the time I was a senior in high school who was teaching percussion, teaching the drum line, and he had been at North Texas. And at this point, I knew like, well, I'm not going to do anything else when I get out of high school. Like I'm a musician,
yes.
I'm going to figure it out, And I had been primed for that, most likely because of my dad and just knowing that it was a possibility, for better or worse. But, you're not really thinking about it at that point. I'm like, I'm going to be a rock star or whatever. It's like, I'm going to do this thing. I'll figure it out. I'm not going to go to school anymore. And then, I get a couple of guys in my ear, Patrick Howard and Manny Arciniega, both guys who Pat went to UNT, Manny went to TCU, which is a private college in Fort Worth, great music program, but also has had a lot to do with UNT as far as like teachers and people going to UNT and then getting their doctorate at TCU or vice versa. So, anyways, Manny, and Pat had been teaching the drumline and orchestral percussion section at my high school. And they were the ones that really had me considering, like, what am I going to do after high school? And both of them having gone through music programs at universities, they were trying to push me in that direction. And I'm grateful that they did. However, I didn't really get serious about it until I think it was right before I graduated. And I was considering going to TCU, but then UNT was on the table. And at this point, I did not know how to read music. I had coasted through high school, drumline, concert band, jazz band, orchestra, just by learning the music by ear.
Yep.
Having a patient enough teacher hovering over me, being like, "No, that's not," and like showing, So I barely could read music. So at this point, May of my senior year of high school, I'm like getting serious about what the next step's going to be. And so I apply for North Texas. I don't even think I applied for TCU, but applied for North Texas. And because my application was so late to the school, I had missed the window to come in and audition for the music school. So I remember I had to like write a letter and basically like ask for permission to do a taped audition to send in. And boy, if that isn't the best loophole that I found, because man, the percussion audition and the drum set audition for that school would have had me sight reading timpani, marimba, sight reading like band charts, big band charts, all things that I would have just folded at. So I did a taped audition, which had me doing a snare, orchestral concert snare solo. I think I did something from the Cerrone book, Portraits in Rhythm, I think is that. Yeah. And then I did a marimba solo and then some drum set stuff, just like showing that I was familiar with different styles. And there was some other stuff I had to say, but anyway, so I didn't have to sight read, which just saved me. I mean, that's the only reason I think I got into that school. Anyway, so I do all that, send in the audition, get accepted, and it's just like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm going to music school. So I really like started working on my reading that summer. My knowledge of theory and all of that stuff was like nil. And of course, like you're taking all those classes, but in my mind, at the same time, like I'm in the music program and your counselor that you're assigned, is like, okay, well, so what, yes, you're in music school, you're taking these music classes, but what core classes are you going to take? You need to take math, you need to take science. And I'm just like, well, can I do that next semester or maybe next year? And they're like, well, we really would like you to be doing. I was like, okay, well, I just, I'm really excited and I just want to. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't care about any of that other stuff. Like I want to soak up as much music, knowledge as the school has to offer. So I didn't take one core class while I was at North Texas. And I was only there for 3 semesters. But yeah, I just dove in. I actually, going back to what we were talking about earlier, before Instagram, there was MySpace. I don't know how many younger listeners you have here,
I recall. Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up striking up a relationship before the semester started that summer. And I think he must have reached out to me. I'm not sure how we hooked up, but another drummer who was going into the jazz studies program, Dave Clare from Michigan, and he just hit me up and was like, "Hey, like I'm starting the jazz studies program too." And so we just kind of became buds online and knew like when we both got to Denton that we'd be hooking up with each other. And he ended up being my best friend while I was there, and we hung out every day. And he was my, I would say we were our accountability partners when it came to practice, but he was really my accountability partner. Because he already had his stuff all together. I was very grateful to him, so thankful to have had him in my time at school, because he really helped me get it together. But yeah, so I get there and, I've got all my classes set up, and one of the things I'm doing is, I think it was 3 days a week lessons with Ed, and he has such high standards. I mean, the whole school does, but the beautiful thing about him that I feel like is still affecting me today, is the high standard that he has for all of his students and the work that you're doing and why you're there. And so getting there and starting to work with him is when I realized, like I was saying earlier, like, oh, I had no idea that I was not taking this seriously at all. I had spent, up until that point, it was just like, hey, playing with my dad at a club on the weekend, in Fort Worth, or like, hey, I'm, playing with a friend's band, or I'm like going on tour. Like in high school, I was in a punk band and we did like Warped Tour dates, and so I was like already like in that world, having a lot of fun, but like not really, just not taking it seriously, And so that's one of the continuing gifts that I received, and anyone that works with Ed receives, just get forever. It's just like, oh man, just very inspiring guy. And I did, there was one lesson. It had to have been my first semester, because it did not happen again. But I'm about to tell you one of the stories you've probably heard about from countless guys. I come in and I am working on this stuff, like I said, my accountability partner, Dave, we would end our days and our classes for the day, go get food, and then go to the practice rooms together and practice for like 3 or 4 hours after classes every day. And so I'm like really trying to work on this stuff. And I show up to one of Ed's lessons. He had given me work to do. Show up for the next lesson. And I come in and, he probably put on it might have been a play along. I don't remember what it was, but he put on maybe a play along, and I've got the book open and I'm reading it and I'm starting to play. And immediately he just stops it. And he's like, what did you do? Like, you obviously didn't work on this material, and basically just told me to leave. Like, you're not taking this seriously. I'll see you next lesson, and go work on the shit. And I was just like, in my head, and it's something that I thought about a lot after that, because I did work on the material. I practiced it, and I wanted to say that to him, like, no, I did the work. Like, what are you talking about? But clearly I did not. I did not dive deep into whatever that curriculum was. I wish I remembered exactly what the lesson material was, but I just took it, probably at face value, and just like worked on it. Like, okay, I got this. Like, what time is dinner? Or like, oh, now I gotta go run. I gotta go run to the vibraphone room and work on this. So like trumpet transcribed solo that I've got to do for this, lesson after Ed's lesson, you know. So I learned not exactly in that moment because it took me a while for it to really sink in, but I learned from that intent, you know, focus, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you really doing here? And I think that he probably asked me that too.
Yeah.
Like, what are, you know, taking it seriously, but not, I feel like there's, you know, you hear a lot like, don't take it too seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. But there is a fine line of like, you know, there's focus and intent that needs to be there with, you know, so it not to an unhealthy level, but yeah, what are you doing? You know? So that was a big one. But yeah, I just the active listening really came into play, you know, after those lessons or during those lessons. And really just like pinpointing like, yeah, you may be playing these drums, but why? You know,
Yeah.
where is the passion? You know, what are you, and I have to say too, like I grew up, I didn't start listening to jazz until I got in the high school jazz band my junior year of high school. So I didn't grow up listening to jazz. It was not something that I was super passionate about. So there was a side of me that was like, really like trying to get it, you know? And since like, I mean, I love listening to jazz. And I love playing it whenever I do, which is pretty rare, but I think I was struggling with that, like an identity kind of thing. Like, oh, like I really want to be here and learn, and I've got to figure out this thing that I just really don't understand right now. You know, it's just this completely new thing to me. And that was something else that was a really great takeaway from lessons with Ed. One of the first things that I remember hearing him say was, you know, it's not that it's hard, it's new.
Yes.
It's just information, you know, which is a great lesson all in itself. And, you know, that's something that I think about a lot. But yeah, and I remember all the while, and things got better with the lessons, you know. There was something that I really loved doing is I think it was maybe towards the end of the semester, you would pick a song to transcribe the drum part of, and then that was like your final for the lessons for the semester. Um, so I really got into transcribing and writing music. After I had figured out how to read it and write it, you know, I really got into that. And that's a practice that I've kept up until, you know, recently. I love doing that. But all the while I'm really getting into like started listening to a lot of like Earth, Wind and Fire and James Brown and Tower of Power, and just like really getting into the kind of funkier side of things. And I think Ed was picking up on that because I remember there was one lesson that he sent me home with this Clyde Stubblefield and Jabo Starks DVD. Have you seen this?
I
Have
haven't
you ever
seen
come
it, but
across this?
I'm familiar with it. So
Yeah, really killer stuff. But you know, and Ed was good about that. Like he, you know, he's one of the greatest teachers of all time, and part of the reasoning is his intuition, and he's taught for so long that he's seen it all, you know. And but he's just so good at understanding each student, you know, and what their needs are or where they're at or whatever. But I think he maybe picked up on that, I don't know, and was kind of like feeding me all of that good stuff, you know. um but I found that I started getting calls for like the cover bands, the guys in school that were wanting to play like funk, or R&B or blues. And I was getting calls for like the local blues bands, in Denton. I wasn't getting calls for the jazz stuff, but I was doing all this other stuff. And then at the same time, on the weekends, I'd go drive back to Fort Worth to play with my dad. Um, so yeah, it was an incredible experience. I'm so thankful for that time. And yeah, I learned a lot. It was very, very overwhelming, but taught me a lot about myself. And I feel like I'm still learning from it. That's how I know that it was such a good thing for me. The transcribing thing, like I said, that became a practice for me that I still carry with me to this day. Yeah, so.
I often find when you look at certain teachers, it's like learning a language. There are teachers that will teach you how to repeat the sentences and write them out. And there's other teachers that will teach you how to speak the language and send you on your way. And you'll fall flat on your face, but because they've empowered you to learn how to have the conversation, once you go out there and start having those conversations, you stop falling on your face, and then you start to find your way, and then you start to find the things that you're passionate about, and you start to figure out who you are. Because sometimes with some curriculum-based programs, they teach you how to emulate things, but they don't really help you figure out you. And at that age, when we're going into college, like you said, you got into jazz, sort of high school, college. I often found when I studied jazz at a college level, I'm having conversations with people and I'm asking them, what music do you like? And everyone's listing all of the jazz records and all of the things that they're supposed to say that they listen to. But you also know very well that until they got there and their teacher told them to check out the stuff, they never heard of any of these things. Like to me, Herbie Hancock was a guy that made this like breakdance rocket video in the 80s. I didn't know he happened to be one of the greatest jazz musicians and composers because that wasn't how I was brought up. So I'm like, the weird 80s guy is actually like a piano player. So it sort of changes your perspective. But I also find the musicians that tend to do the best are the ones that open up and explore the things that are being presented to them, but never let go of the things that got them there in the first place. And I think sometimes when people lose their musical identity, it's because they feel like they can't acknowledge the things that inspired them because they have to fit into a certain mold. And you can't get rid of the things that started that spark because that's always going to be influential and a part of your creative journey. For me, it was like, I loved getting into jazz. I didn't really understand it, but I have a great passion for it. And I love the expressiveness. And I wish I could step outside of my comfort zone to be as free as some of these musicians are. And I am when I'm in my practice room, but then when you kind of go on the stage, you start to fall back into I think I got to play what I think I'm supposed to play that I learned in college rather than just playing what you feel. But that's really just, part of the exploration. When people are in a college environment, it tends to be a very community-based thing where people kind of get together and they share ideas and they build each other, but it also tends to be a very competitive environment. So when you were at North Texas, how did you find it to be a very competitive environment or a nurturing one?
Yeah, I've definitely a little bit of both. The competitive thing, so much of that also comes from inside the dome. It's like, and that stuff, I feel like you deal with that forever. But yeah, in a music school environment, when everybody's around that age, it's pretty prevalent. Certainly competitive. The drummer community was pretty friendly with each other. I mean, most of us hung out and were friends. the program kind of sets you up to be competitive though, because there are like the different lab bands, the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, all down to the 8 o'clock, I think. And then there's the other labs. And I never made an o'clock band, but I did. I think my last semester I was playing drums in the rhythm section for the jazz vocal lab, which was all of the vocal majors. And this was a class or course for them to learn how to like lead a band. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, they set you up to feel that competitiveness, and I think it just goes with the program, and it's a good thing for sure. I think because it gets you to figure your stuff out, if you want to, if you have that drive. But yeah, definitely a lot of nurture too. I felt that from Ed for sure. It's like he clearly cared. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
He'd write you off in a second. I also just felt that maybe not necessarily from the students, but the school itself, it felt like a safe place when it comes to like learning, there's so much knowledge there. And I spent so many hours in the library. You could check out 10 CDs at a time. And I had just gotten a new MacBook laptop. And so I was going there on a daily basis. And I would say the majority of my digital music collection to this day is thanks to the UNT Music Library. I felt nurtured in that way. I will say don't think I didn't see that Police poster behind you. Senior year of high school, the Police were my favorite band. And I carried that with me into college. Still do. Stuart Copeland is one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, me too.
Love. Yeah. So there was a class at school called Percussion Fundamentals, and I think it was only for first semester students, and it was all of the percussion majors and the drum set, jazz studies drum set guys. And Percussion Fundamentals, basically every time you'd meet, you'd be going over, not a generalization, but everything that you're going to go over through your time at school, so like one day you'd be spending time on like concert snare drum, and they would bring in Paul Rennick or somebody, one of the snare drum teachers or orchestral guys, stuff like that. So there was one day we're focusing on drum set. I would imagine Ed probably came in. But then they're going around the room and asking everybody who they're listening to or who their favorite drummers are. And it gets to me, and I said Stuart Copeland of the Police, and I actually got laughed at. And that was the time when I knew, like, okay, I don't know if this place is for me. Like if I'm getting laughed at for enjoying the masterful playing of Stuart Copeland, then what am I doing here? And I was actually, I was just talking to, well, whatever, I don't want to name drop, but I was just talking to somebody about that, who also went to North Texas, and he was appalled. But so I would say for the most part nurturing, but a little bit of competitiveness and a little bit of like, just, what are you doing here? I keep going back to that. It's like I really feel like that was a time in my life where I realized, like, oh, I gotta, or not I gotta, but like, oh, I haven't really thought about this. Like, I maybe should, just a little bit of shift in perspective, and it worked. I think, But I will say one more thing I want to say about that school. There was a class that was taught by the trumpet. I think he was a trumpet professor, Saunders, and it was called Intro to Jazz Records. And I think it met 2 or 3 times a week, but basically over the course of the hour, chronologically, I believe, at the beginning of the semester, you started out talking about records from maybe like the 20s, like, Dixieland jazz stuff. But basically, the professor would outline a handful of records, and you would go through, okay, you got the name of the record, you got the artist, you got the players, where was it recorded? What was the studio? What was the town? What was the area like? What were these guys doing on the weekend? Were they all playing together? Like, it was a very in-depth conversation about a handful of records, each class. And it went all the way up, to probably, I guess, current day. But the point was to get you in that mindset of like, go deep on this stuff. If you're going to, like, I keep going back to, what are you doing here? Like, get serious about this, like, learn. It's not all just about putting a record on, while you're driving or like cleaning the house or whatever. It's like, you got the active listening component, like, sit down with a record, listen to it. Who's it by? Oh, Count Basie? Like, okay, who's playing drums? Well, when was it? If it was 1962, I'd say it was Sonny Payne, And like, where was this record made? Well, I don't know if they were recording in Kansas City or not. Like, I should find that out. Like, what was the label? Probably Columbia, maybe. I don't know. So it was this way to get you thinking about this stuff on a deeper level. And for me, that really sparked something. And I ate that up. And when I would get these records from the music library, I would put them into my computer. I think David, my friend that I was talking about earlier, accountability partner, Dave, got me doing this. But in iTunes, you have all the categories, and there's a genre category that would list the genre of every record, which was most of the time BS anyways. So we would replace the genre with the drummer on the album,
cool.
Which was great because in your iTunes, you could look up by genre. So I could just click on like Jimmy Cobb, and I'd have every record that I have in my collection with Jimmy Cobb playing drums. So yeah, that class, and also David, who I'm just eternally grateful for, really shifted something in my thinking. And that's where I'm at still today. Especially when I find, a record that I love, like, I just gotta find everything out about it.
When I was in college, one of the most profound lessons that I had is that my teacher in first year, who was really tough, but I learned a ton from him, took a sheet of paper and he wrote down 12 jazz albums. And he goes, part of your homework is to go buy these records. And so I'd made the effort to actually go out, and some of them were not easy to find, but I found all of the records. And because you've invested your time and your money into tracking these down, you committed the time into experiencing the record. And I came from the generation that if I wanted to check out some new music, I had to jump on the bus, to go down to get on the subway, to then go downtown Toronto and then wander around the record stores and then get the record and then get back on the subway and then peel off the shrink wrap, read the liner notes because you had about an hour drive to get back home. So by the time you got home, you had already invested time into this record, and then you would listen to the 6 to 8 tracks over and over again for a month. So you would absorb the record, where I think now, because music is so accessible, it's people don't absorb music the same as they used to. They listen to it, but they can't, that song that really captured their attention, they can't tell you who it was because the radio is not always telling you who it was. iTunes isn't telling you, Spotify isn't telling you who it is, and they've already played 17 other songs after that. And so you have to wait for that to show up again or make the effort to go and explore. And I think if you're willing to put the time into investing into the experience to listen to music, you absorb that and you put that experience into the music that you play. And I found, because I had to invest into tracking these down, they made much more of an impact as opposed to something that was just given to me amongst hundreds and hundreds of other things. And I kind of miss that in a lot of ways, because that was part of the joy of musical discovery. And I liked buying the records because it would often tell you, like I just said, the stories behind things, or it would tell you what the song forms were on some of these jazz records. And I'm like, great, now I have a better understanding in terms of composition, because this music that spoke to me, I now understand what the intention behind that was. And I think you tend to go deep into the music that you listen to, and I think that's had a profound effect in terms of the music that you play. Now, after North Texas, you eventually made your way to LA. What sparked that decision?
Yeah, so I left school. I left school early. I was there for 3 semesters. At some point in the 3rd semester, I was in a car accident, basically like a head-on collision, and I ended up injuring my left wrist, and I got a tear in a ligament in my wrist. So what sparked leaving school was that injury and having to take a break from playing. And I think there was probably already something going on there, that the accident just like was like, okay, you're already on the way to tearing this thing. Like, let's just help you out. 'Cause I'd been playing a lot, practicing more than I ever had up until that point or have since. So I had that injury. I was told to completely rest for like a month or something like that. So that was part of the leaving. And at the same time, I got an offer to move to Austin to play with a friend. And so I was kind of just thinking like, well, I want to be playing out, and this, will be fun. It's with friends. It'll get me into Austin, like, and who knows what'll happen after that. So there was the injury part, and then there was that part that was like, okay, maybe this is like time to at least take a break. Because in my mind at that time, I was like, well, I'll probably come back to school, I wasn't ready to leave completely. So I leave school that semester. I'm not playing for a little bit, but not much is happening anyways. But I moved to Austin for about a year or so, playing with a buddy and just kind of mostly just hanging out, which was a little bit of a breath of fresh air after the really intense experience of schooling, as wonderful as it was, So yeah, and then I ended up moving back to Fort Worth, and I got a job waiting tables for about almost a year, maybe. Move out to LA with this same friend, and I'm just kind of like thinking, oh, this might be setting me up for something later on. And we're out here for not that long, maybe a matter of months. Go back to Texas, and then I come back out here with him, and that's when I end up meeting James and a lot of people that are still close in my life, to this day. I met my wife somewhere in that time frame, and her parents are musicians out here, really fantastic. Her mom's a singer, and her dad's a bass player producer. And I've met a lot of people through them. It's funny how connected these scenes are, especially when you find like the good people, the like-minded people. It's just like everybody knows everybody. I don't know. It's a healthy, feels like a really healthy community of players out here, which is funny because you just hear a lot of people trash talk LA, and I get it. Like you can have a bad experience out here for sure, but you can have a bad experience anywhere. Yeah, that's how I've always felt about that. But yeah, and then so I didn't really do too much, but I met, we were talking earlier about James, that I met him when I came out here, and not long after meeting him, he called me up and asked me to sub a gig for him. And that was my first gig in LA. And I was just like, this can't possibly be happening. Is this really how but then at the same time, I was like, all right, this is it. I got to show up and do this thing. But yeah, I met a lot of really, really wonderful people during that time out here. Like I said, people that are still really close to me today, and kind of just developed like a nice little network of friends. And then I left LA and I moved to Austin in 2012. I got a call from Bobby Whitlock, who was a friend of my dad's. My dad had played with him. And I got a call from him asking to join his band. And Bobby, I don't know if you're familiar with Bobby at all, but he's okay, yeah.
I am.
Incredible guy, just prolific talent and monster rock and roll soul singer. But he called me asking if I wanted to join his band in Austin. And I wasn't really doing too much out here, and it just kind of felt like, you know what, this is good a time as any to move to Austin. And yeah, I just feel like that's how a lot of things have happened for me. It's just been like, oh, this is happening now. Like, okay, well, I'm going to go do that. It just felt very organic, as you were saying earlier, very just natural. And yeah, I think I jumped ahead from your question, but I don't know if that answered your question at all. Sorry.
I find, and I've learned this as I've gotten older, if you follow the organic path and build genuine connections, you end up finding the things that you're meant to find that you may not even realize that you're seeking. Whereas if you're following the path of expectations and beliefs that the only way to success is to do this, then you end up getting some opportunities, but you end up not being fulfilled, and you end up burning the bridges that you were often meant to follow in the first place.
Yeah, I guess the question is like, how do you set yourself up to be like aware of that when it's happening, whatever that is? There's also an element to it of being like ready for it, whatever it is, these abstract ideas, but like being ready for something whenever it happens, or being open to it, or, whether it means like having like the, the technical facility or the want or, the actual ability to do it, and at this time it was packing up and leaving LA for me and moving to Austin. And I was just all for it. Also, Bobby was in Derek and the Dominoes and had a history of playing with two of my favorite drummers of all time, Jim Gordon and Jim Keltner. And at this time, it's so funny. It felt like such a wildly serendipitous thing to happen, because months leading up to this call that I got from Bobby, and I was living out here in LA and really just soaking up the history of the music scene out here, and specifically like the history of the recording scene. And I had just really got heavily into Jim Gordon. And I mean, I was picking up every record that I could find his name on. I would go to Amoeba, which at the time, that was pretty early in my music collecting, my album collecting days. So Amoeba was the only store I really knew about. And since, like, I've got my spots out here, but not throwing any shade on Amoeba. Amoeba's, but yeah, I would go to Amoeba and I would just flip through. Actually, I guess at this time I was still doing CDs. So yeah, I'd go to Amoeba, flip through the CDs in the rock section, and just looking for anything that might have Jim Gordon's name on it, and doing a lot of like research online, and going on YouTube and trying to find videos of him and all this stuff. I just got so deep into his playing, transcribing. I transcribed so many tracks that he played on, really like trying to nail down the nuances and the subtleties of his playing, which you can hear, obviously on record when you're listening to it. But I just kind of wanted to go a level deeper. And I think this is one of the first instances where, for me, I just did everything I could to emulate this guy, which is something, it is a great practice. And it's something that we, as musicians, as drummers, like, you got to do it. I mean, it is the way that you further yourself. It's just part of the journey. That being said, you can take it too far, right? I mean, you don't want to lose yourself in that, and all that to say, I definitely lost myself in that. And, I was just, like I said, I was doing everything I could to sound like this guy. So that's all happening for me personally. I will also say, I at the time, he was still incarcerated in prison out here, and so I wrote a letter to him, and I actually called the prison as well to see if I could get him on the phone. And I, like, what was I gonna say? but I was such a fanboy and just absolutely in awe of what his playing, how his playing spoke to me, and just what still to this day. I mean, he's my top guy, but yeah, so I was just enamored with him and his playing. And then I get this call from Bobby, and it's just like, are you kidding me? Like, am I really being asked to join Bobby Whitlock of Derek and the Dominoes band, playing these songs, which I know, like, I know every little piece of every one of those songs, like, especially on drums. Like, I don't know as much today, but at that time, you could throw on one of those tracks, and without a chart or anything, I guarantee you I could get really close to playing every fill, like every ghost note, everything. So I was just like over the moon with that, as an option. It's like, wow, okay, so I'm moving to Austin. And LA was somewhere that at that time I felt like I'll be back here. Like this, I love this place. I'm coming back, but this has come up, and I'm gonna just follow whatever this is.
When I look at your bio, you've had a very prolific career, both as a live musician and a studio musician. You've done a ton of records, and you've done some amazing shows. One of the things that I'm really intrigued about is that you're also the current touring drummer for music icon John Fogerty. So how did that gig come about, and what has that experience been like for you?
Well, let's see, March or April of 2022, I was in a band that I had joined after playing with Bobby that was based in Austin called the Band of Heathens. And I had been with them for about 10 years. My brother-in-law, Jesse Wilson, he had come into the band at some point during my tenure with them and to play bass. So we're both with the Heathens, and it gets to be sometime in the spring 2022. And I learned from Jesse that he's been offered the bass position with John Fogerty. So Jesse and I were, a little bit of context. We, at that time were friends, still are, but at that time we knew, John's sons, and Jesse had been playing with John's sons. They have a band that he had been playing with for some years. So that was his connection to the whole thing. So he got an offer to join John's band because John's bass player was leaving. Can't remember who he's playing with, but he was leaving to return to a gig that he had before he started playing with John. He'd been with John for a while though, but so Jesse has an offer to join the band, and at the time that we're both in a band, a pretty serious band in Austin, and so he's going to try to make them both work, try to have both gigs. And so we had let's see, how did this go? Okay, so I'm hanging at home one day, and I get a text from Tyler, one of John's sons, and he says, "Hey, are you free tomorrow? We're gonna audition Jesse for my dad's band, and we need a drummer to play for the audition." So I'm like, "Yeah, of course." I mean, I grew up with that music. Like, I don't have to do too much work to play those songs. I will say one of my earliest memories of playing drums is playing along to Fortunate Son. I can picture it in my room. I can picture the kit. I had my little boombox cranked. So I knew that music. So I was like, yeah, okay, I can definitely come over and play those songs. So yeah, I show up to John's house and we're there to audition Jesse. And John comes in and I think we just started playing, and I don't remember what song. It was one of the hits, Bad Moon Rising, or yeah, I think it must have been Bad Moon or Born on the Bayou. But we stop and John looks at me and he's got a grin on his face and he just says, "Where have you been?" And I'm just like, I don't know how to answer that. I just started laughing, and then John gets to it and he's like, "Well, we're here because we're working Jesse into the band." And then he told me a piece of information that I didn't know, which was he wanted to see how he and I gelled because he wanted to start recording some new solo music. And so he wanted to see how we played together because he was thinking about hiring me for the studio. And I was just like, "Oh man, great. Like, so that was new information to me too, because all I knew, I got a text saying, asking if I could come over to help Jesse audition. And he loved Jesse's playing, of course, and it was obvious like Jesse was going to be fine, and he got the gig, And so we're there for a few hours, and we just keep playing these songs, and John's just being like really complimentary, and then later on he says, "Well, Kenny's not going to be able to make some shows coming up this year, so if that ends up happening, like, you're definitely the first call sub." And I was just like, "Oh my God, amazing." Just overload information. I can't even believe this is happening. Thank God I live in LA, and can show up for something like this, get a call the day before. So that's like all that I knew at that point. And Jesse and I had to get back with the Heathens, I think the next weekend or 2 weekends after that, some really close after that. And we go out for a run, and Jesse has to tell the guys, like, I got this offer and I'm going to take it, And Jesse he's my guy, best friend, brother-in-law, family. And at this point, we've been playing together for, I think, 4 or 5 years with the Heathens. And I just love him dearly. Really love being in a rhythm section with him. And I was really bummed at the thought of not having that playing relationship anymore. But as I said earlier, he was going to try to make both gigs work. He really wanted to stay in the band. So I'll try to speed this one up. So he's talking to the guys, tells them what's going on. And, they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, we'll figure it out. And then, I hear like on the side, like they're already talking about replacing him like that night, And so I'm just like, okay. At this time, I had been in the band 10 years, and touring has never been an easy thing for me. And I think I was feeling some real serious burnout. And if it hadn't have been for 2020 and COVID, I feel like, and not working, like touring coming to a complete halt, being at home for like a year, if that hadn't happened, I might not have had this like shift in identity, or like shift in perspective. But I was kind of ready to take a break. And so I find out like they're already talking about replacing him. And so I'm thinking like, okay, I came in on this gig with a brand new bass player. Like they switched out the rhythm section, and I'm thinking like that might be a good offer for these guys. I don't want them to get a new bass player and then 2 or 3 months later me be like, guys, I'm not feeling, so I'm just thinking like I should tell them like how I'm feeling, and I think it would probably be best for them to just get a new rhythm section, which they ended up doing. The bass player that they got to replace Jesse had a lot of playing experience and was in a band with this drummer based in Austin, and he ended up coming in. So they were like kind of a package deal. So it ended up working out great for them. But yeah, so I ended up quitting that weekend that we were out on the road, and just thinking like, oh man, like it just feels like what I have to do. I don't know what's going to be next, but I'm not going to stress about it, because it really, I don't want to say it's out of my hands, but like whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But I kind of got to do this for like my mental health. So I quit the band. I think it was early April 2022. And for 3 or 4 weeks, I was just home gardening. Really resetting myself. Just being really thankful to be home and have time with my wife, and the cats and all of that. And yeah, like 3 or 4 weeks go by, and then I get a call from a blocked number. And I thought like, oh, this has got to be Bobby, because Bobby Whitlock always called from a blocked number. It was the only person that ever called me from a blocked number. And so I'm like, all right, Bobby. So I answer the phone, and it's John, and he is offering me a role in his band. And I remember I was sitting at the table with Lucy. I get the call, find out it's John. I go outside, sit down on the steps on the porch, and get this offer to join John's band. And I just, just a wildly like surreal moment, especially in light of like not having a plan for what's next, I'm just really thankful for that, because I don't know what I was going to do, and that just kind of came. I won't say it came out of nowhere, but I had no idea that I would be getting a call like that, So yeah, that was it. Sorry to go off on a tangent there, but there was a little bit of context I feel like that needed to be in there to answer that question appropriately.
I've always heard that John is also very particular about what it is that he wants from a drummer, and the parts that he has for his music are intentional. Sure, there's aspects that you can add your own color and taste to them, but you're also there to do a job. And I've also heard he likes to push tempos live. And I've had the pleasure of seeing him 3 times, always with Kenny Aronoff behind the kit, who's a legend. And I've heard Kenny often say it's like he'll be on stage and John will turn around and say, push me faster, faster. And because he likes that energy. And I've always walked away thinking, for someone that's been around in this industry for so long, he has not mellowed. There's a guy that is a ferocious guitar player. You forget how iconic he is as a songwriter. And it's intense. It's a very high energy, intense show. And I remember the last time I saw him, they were doing Fortunates, and there was some guys sitting in the audience, and they're turning around, they're getting pissed off because they said, drummer's playing it way too fast. Drummer's ruining the song. He's playing it way too fast. And all I'm thinking is, I bet you John turned around to Kenny and said, faster, faster, push it. Because it was like, because Kenny knows how to keep a tempo. So I'm curious as to whether or not you find that to be sort of your experience.
Yeah. Well, I'll back up a little bit and speak to what you mentioned earlier, and say with some context. So when I came into the band, the only sort of direction that I got from John, and it wasn't even really direction, it was just his observation of Kenny's playing and how Kenny would play the music, was he just said Kenny played too many rim shots. So it was something to that effect. And he was like, you don't always play rim shots, do you? And I was like, I mean, no, I don't know. I didn't know how to answer that either. I was like, what do you want me to say here? So, I mean, honestly, that was it, because the way, like when we first played, when Jesse was auditioning, when we first played together, and I had seen John play with Kenny multiple times up to that point. And for me, that music, it was just missing just this core like groove. And I feel like I've used the word intention a lot, but in this conversation, but the intention was lost to me the way Kenny was playing it. And Kenny is an amazing musician, amazing drummer. He's done so much incredible work. But stylistically just treated John's songs in his own way, which of course, like that's what you want to do. To my ear, I was just missing the credence of it, the Doug Clifford of it, the swampiness for sure, the kind of meat and potatoes of it, So whenever I I went into Jesse's audition to play those songs, that's kind of how I treated it. Was like, I'm gonna play this stuff the way I've heard it all my life from the records, because that's what really gets me, with those songs. It's like, it's not about, it is, I was just about to say it's not about the drums, but it is very much about the drums. It's not about the drums in the way that it could be approached by a drummer, It's like, it's that thing where like the simplicity of it is deceivingly difficult, but it's just all about the approach, man. And so I approached it that way. Like, I'm going to play this as close to the record as I can. And that was actually the other thing that John said, is like, he wanted to get closer to the original recordings in the live show, the way the songs were being presented. He wanted to get closer to that vibe. So I was like, done. I can definitely do that. I cannot do what Kenny Aronoff does, and that's, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, or It's a good thing that I can't do that because only Kenny can do that, you know? Um, so yeah, we play the songs like that, and that the energy, it's got to be up for sure. It's pretty spot on most every night, but there will be some nights like by the end of the set, it's like, oh yeah, we're burning right now, And by the time we get to Fortunate Son and then Traveling Band and Proud Mary, which close out the set and the encore, it's like we're playing these songs faster than we usually do, but I got to be right there with them,
Yeah.
And that's something that
Yep.
I really have learned a lot since playing with John is I feel like I've gotten to another place in my like ability to focus in real time, when it comes to listening, because I am just zeroed on him and what he's doing on the guitar, and he's such a great guitar player. And I mean the feel, it's all there. I mean that's him. That
Yeah.
that whole the vibe on all those records, as much as it is a band and it's everybody as a unit creating that sound, like he is the driving force behind that, and he's still got it. So uh yeah, I gotta listen to him, and as long as I can hear what he's doing and lock in with that, we're good, man.
As we start to wind down here, when you look throughout your career and you've had these iconic moments and all these great opportunities, what are some of the things you are most proud of from those experiences? And outside of music, what are the things that keep you grounded to ensure that you're living a good, balanced life?
I will say, going back to 2020 and the experience that I had that year, there was a point where my identity and my relationship with the instrument and the work just really totally changed. At the beginning of that, the pandemic, everybody's starting to see the dates getting canceled, and then you're just like, okay, that's getting canceled. Well, maybe, we'll be back at it the next month, and then no, that gets canceled. And so, then there was a point where like all touring for the rest of that year was just not happening for everybody. And I just, up until then, was like, yeah, I'm a drummer, like that is who I am, It's what I do. That's everything. And then it wasn't. Touring, it's like I'm a touring drummer. Like I travel for work. That's what I do. It's who I am. And then it wasn't. And uh as as awful of a year as that was, and as hard as it was on so many people, I know that I'm not alone when I say I got some good out of it. Just in terms of realizing like, oh, I'm more than this thing that I've been doing. And as hurtful as it was to lose that work and like realize like, oh, I've this like my passion, like it's just I can't sustain my wife and I anymore with it. Like I don't have money coming in to pay bills for this thing that I've been doing my whole life, that it's never been a problem before. Like what, Um, so that year, that was really the beginning of me, I feel like internally just changing the way I viewed my relationship with this beautiful thing that I get to do, that we all get to do, Um, and I feel like since then and maybe it just helps that I'm getting older too, but I've just gotten further and further away from that being my entire existence. So I really got into gardening that year, as I feel like a lot of, at least people in my orbit did as well. So that, and I'll say, like, before, this is kind of just, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I didn't really have anything else in my life before then. It was just like drums, making records, touring, picking up gigs, freelancing, just all drums all the time. No hobbies, I mean, like reading, yeah, sure, whatever, like going on hikes, like, yeah, but like nothing real outside of that, and gardening, I feel like, was the first thing that really took me into a comfortable headspace and like helped me ground myself when I was home. And it's something that I still do. I love it. Spend time outside, get my hands in the dirt, eat what you grow, all these beautiful things. That's done a lot of good for me. And yeah, just having like a healthy relationship with the home life, and my wife, it's, yeah, I just really appreciate all of that now. And I need that more than I did. There was a time where it was just all drums. So I think shifting my perspective a little bit has helped a lot. Yeah, and the other part of your question, proud of, man. I'm just yeah, I feel just really thankful for the work that I've had, and the rooms that I've gotten to be in with the people that have been in there, and the people I've gotten to play with, and the music that's been made. I mean, all of it. I am proud of all of it, and the relationships that I have, with those musicians and my friends out here, and the people that I get to go see, out here. Like, I'm proud of the network of friends, and yeah, all of the work, I think. Yeah, I don't know if yeah. Does that answer your question?
Often when we're starting our career, we focus on setting out to make a living. And then as we get further into our career, we realize we're changing our focus and we set out to make a life. And we learn what's important, and we learn to find balance, and we learn that the living is an aspect to a successful life, but not the core thing. And sometimes things like the pandemic allow us to reset and come back with a renewed passion and focus. I greatly admire the things that you've accomplished. I'm incredibly inspired by your journey. I am really grateful that Matt Starr connected us, and I really hope we get an opportunity to connect and do this again. But Richard, it has been such an honor and a pleasure to finally get a chance to talk to you, and I hope to catch you at a show at some point.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me, man. And yeah, props to Matt for putting us in touch.
You've been listening to the Drummer's Pathway podcast. Please share and subscribe, get the word out, and let's keep the discussion going. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.